Have you ever trusted someone so much that you believed nothing could ever shake that relationship? Have you ever felt like you had built an entire life on solid foundations, only to see everything collapse in a matter of seconds? Have you experienced the feeling of looking at the person you love most and realizing that the trust you considered unbreakable had been betrayed in such a cruel way that it seemed impossible to recover? That is exactly what happened to me. My name is Rachel Donovan. I am 43 years old, and this is the true story of how I was broken by the pain of betrayal, but found within myself a strength I never thought I possessed. A strength that emerged when I discovered and embraced the law of attraction. Until a few years ago, I believed I had the life of my dreams. I grew up in a small town in rural Illinois, United States, and from a young age, I was always taught to value honesty, family, and hard work. When I married at 28, the man I believed to be the love of my life, I was certain my destiny was set, a life of companionship, respect, and mutual growth. His name was Daniel, charismatic, hardworking, with that way of making everyone around him feel special. I fell in love with the way he made me laugh, how he seemed to understand me without me saying a word, as if he were the missing piece to complete my life. The first years of marriage were exactly as I had imagined, a modest house but full of love. Lazy weekends watching movies, simple dinners, yet filled with happiness. I worked as a teacher for many years, while he advanced in his career in finance. We weren't millionaires, but we lived comfortably, and I wholeheartedly believed we had something rare, a true union. But life often tests us in ways we never imagine, and in my case, the test came in the most painful way possible: betrayal. I will never forget the day I found out. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I had arrived home early from work, thinking to surprise him pleasantly. I wanted to make Daniel's favorite dinner, open a bottle of wine, and celebrate the small victories of everyday life. But as I entered the living room, I saw something that forever changed how I viewed the world. His phone was on the table, and a notification caught my attention. I never had the habit of going through his things, but something inside me made me pick up that device. It was as if an inner voice screamed, "Look!" And I looked. Messages, conversations, words not meant for me. Declarations of love, secret meetings, promises made to another woman. My heart raced, my hands trembled, and I felt as if the ground had vanished beneath my feet. It wasn't just a physical betrayal. It was emotional, it was deep, it was as if everything we had built had been thrown away silently without me even noticing. In that moment, I felt broken. Everything I believed about us, about love, about life, collapsed. I looked at myself in the mirror that night and didn't recognize myself. Where was that woman full of life, dreams, and faith in the future? In her place, there was only a shadow, someone consumed by pain, anger, and the overwhelming feeling of not being enough. The following days were the darkest of my life. I could barely get out of bed. I cried in silence so that no one would notice the size of the hole inside me. I went to work mechanically, like a robot, and returned home only to drown in tears. Friends tried to cheer me up, but I couldn't hear anything beyond my own inner voice repeating, "You are worthless. If he cheated on you, it's because you weren't enough. You failed." And this is where the transition of my story begins. Because it was precisely in this rock bottom, in this place of darkness where there seemed to be no way out, that a new seed began to sprout. One day, while aimlessly browsing the internet, I came across a video about the law of attraction. Until then, I didn't believe in such things. To me, it seemed like cheap self-help talk, far removed from the concrete reality of life. But something in that video held my attention. It was the story of a woman who, after losing everything, had managed to rebuild her life through the power of her thoughts and the energy she emitted to the universe. I admit, my first reaction was to laugh. What do you mean thinking positive will change my life? I thought. But at the same time, something inside me was desperate to believe. I needed to find a way out, a reason to get out of bed, a spark of hope that could guide me out of that darkness. That's when I decided to try. I had nothing to lose. I started simply. Affirmations in front of the mirror, even when I didn't believe in them. I am worthy of love. I deserve happiness. I am strong. At first, it felt ridiculous. My voice trembled, my face still swollen from crying, reflected only pain and disbelief. But little by little, those words began to penetrate my subconscious. In addition to affirmations, I began writing in a notebook every day. I called it my gratitude journal. Even when everything seemed lost, I forced myself to write down 3 things I was grateful for. Sometimes it was just, I'm alive. I have a roof over my head. I took a deep breath and got out of bed. Other times, I noted simple details. A student's smile, the aroma of coffee in the morning, the warmth of the sun through the window. These small steps were the foundation of my reconstruction. I didn't know it yet, but I was reprogramming my mind, changing my vibration, and opening space for the universe to respond in a new way. However, don't think it was easy. There were days I wanted to give up, days when it seemed impossible to believe that something so intangible could truly transform my life. There were moments when anger spoke louder, when I felt like confronting Daniel, throwing all my pain at him. But instead, I chose to look inward. Each day, I understood a little more that true change was not outside, but within me. And it was in this process of self-discovery that a question began to echo constantly in my mind. What if all of this happened not to destroy me, but to show me the strength I always had but never recognized? Gradually, I realized that the betrayal, painful as it was pushing me in a new direction. I was learning to love myself again, to reclaim my self-esteem, to believe that I deserved much more than scraps of love and pieces of loyalty. And it was precisely when I began to truly believe that something changed in a surprising way. But that part I will tell you in the next stage of my story. Have you ever felt that the universe was trying to speak to you, but deep down you weren't sure if it was just a coincidence or truly a sign? That's exactly how the first steps of my transformation began to manifest. After weeks of writing in my gratitude journal and repeating affirmations in the mirror, I admit I still doubted it all. I looked at the pages of my notebook and asked myself, am I just fooling myself to survive this pain? But even without believing 100%, something inside me made me continue. It was as if, on some level, my soul knew I was on the right path. And then the first signs began to appear. One morning, I was on my way to work, still with a heavy mind, when I noticed something I had never seen before. The sky was such an intense, vivid blue that it made me stop for a few seconds. It wasn't just the sky. It was as if, in that instant, I had returned to seeing life with new eyes. I felt a wave of calm wash over my chest. It was small but real. And I realized that in some way I had attracted that moment of peace myself. It was on that same day that something curious happened. One of my coworkers, who rarely spoke to me, approached and said, "Rachel, you have a different energy today. You even seem lighter, more radiant." That caught me by surprise. I didn't feel radiant. But somehow what I was cultivating internally was starting to be noticed externally. These small occurrences gave me the strength to continue. I began to intensify my practices. I started visualizing not just single phrases, but entire scenes of the future I wanted to live. Before going to sleep, I would close my eyes and imagine myself smiling, free, feeling proud of the woman I was. I pictured myself traveling, meeting new people, building a life full of meaning and true love. At first, it seemed like a distant fantasy, but the more I repeated it, the more real it became inside me. And, as I later learned, this is one of the greatest secrets of the law of attraction. When you truly feel that you are already living what you desire, the universe responds. And it responded. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected invitation. A longtime friend whom I hadn't seen in years reached out to invite me to join a meditation and spirituality study group. My first reaction was to refuse. After all, I had never been the spiritual type, and after the betrayal, I was even more closed off to such things. But once again, that inner voice insisted, "Go." And I went. At the first meeting, I sat in the corner, observing silently. The group was composed of people of different ages and stories, all seeking inner growth. The facilitator, a woman named Grace, spoke about energy, about how our thoughts shape our reality, and I couldn't help but think, this is exactly what I've been trying to apply in my life. It was in this group that I had one of the most remarkable experiences of my journey. Doing a guided meditation, I clearly visualized a version of myself smiling, confident, walking down an illuminated path. The sensation was so real that when I opened my eyes, tears streamed down my face. They weren't tears of pain, but of hope. I realized in that instant that my future didn't have to be defined by what Daniel had done. I had the power to create something entirely new. Of course, the process wasn't linear. There were days I relapsed when the memory of the betrayal overwhelmed me and I questioned everything again. But unlike before, now I had tools. Instead of sinking into despair, I would take my notebook, write my gratitudes, or sit in silence to breathe deeply and realign my energy. And it was in this state of transformation that I began to attract new opportunities. One of them happened at work. I had always been a dedicated teacher, but for years I felt my efforts went unnoticed. Shortly after beginning my visualization practices, I was surprised by a proposal from the school administration to lead a new educational project for at-risk youth. It was a huge challenge, but also a chance to give new meaning to my career. I accepted without hesitation, and as I immersed myself in the project, I noticed something incredible. The more I focused on helping others, the more I healed myself. The smiles of those young people, their stories of overcoming adversity, their thirst for learning, all of it reminded me daily that life is much bigger than the pain I had experienced. And here's an important detail. When you change your vibration, the entire world begins to respond. I noticed it in small things, unexpected encounters with inspiring people, books appearing in my path, phrases that seemed directed exactly at me. It was as if the universe were conspiring in my favor, telling me every day, keep going, you're on the right path. But amidst all this, there was one issue I had yet to face: Daniel. Even though we were already separated, the wound was still open. I had to decide whether to carry that weight forever or find a way to transform that pain into learning. It was during a quiet night while writing in my journal that something happened. I picked up the pen and, without planning, wrote, "I forgive you, Daniel." When I finished the sentence, I felt a mixture of relief and resistance. Part of me screamed, "He doesn't deserve your forgiveness." But another part whispered, "This forgiveness isn't for him, it's for you." I cried for hours that night, but in the end I felt as if a ton had been lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't immediate or complete forgiveness, but it was the beginning of something liberating. And it was from that moment that my life began to transform even more profoundly. I didn't know it yet, but the universe was about to show me that when you decide to free yourself from the past and open space for the new, miracles can happen. Have you ever felt that, after spending so much time in the dark, suddenly a sliver of light begins to shine through the window, slowly illuminating the room? That was exactly how my life began to transform. It didn't happen overnight, but with every small step, every gratitude practice, every visualization, and every meditation, I got closer to a version of myself I had almost forgotten existed. After that night when I first wrote, "I forgive you, Daniel," in my journal, something inside me truly shifted. It was as if I had unlocked a new energy, as if I had finally taken a step toward the freedom I had been longing for. I didn't know if I could fully forgive him yet, but I realized I didn't have to hold on to hatred forever. Holding on to resentment was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. I was only poisoning myself. And when that release began, the universe responded. Just a few days later, I received a message from Grace, the facilitator of the meditation group I had started attending. She invited me to take part in a weekend spiritual retreat. My first reaction was hesitation. A retreat? Me? Isn't that too much for someone like me? But at the same time, something inside told me I needed to go. It felt like an opportunity the universe was placing in front of me to expand my healing even further. At the retreat, I experienced things that completely changed the way I saw life. Surrounded by nature, far from the distractions of daily life, I was able to reconnect with myself on a level I had never reached before. There were moments of deep silence where only the sound of the wind and birds accompanied me, and it was in those moments that I could hear my own soul more clearly. In one of the activities, we were invited to write a letter to ourselves from the future. I closed my eyes and imagined myself 5 years ahead, living the life I desired. Then I began to write as if that future Rachel was telling me how everything had changed. I wrote about traveling, about finding true love again, about experiencing genuine and constant happiness. By the time I finished, I noticed my hands were trembling. That letter wasn't just imagination. It was a declaration to the universe of what I was ready to receive. I returned from the retreat different, lighter, more confident, more open to the new. The people around me noticed. My coworkers said I seemed calmer. My friends said my eyes looked brighter, and even strangers on the street smiled at me more often. I truly was vibrating at a new frequency. And it was during this phase that I began to attract unexpected opportunities. One of them came through the educational project I had taken on. During a meeting with representatives of a partner NGO, I met a woman named Olivia. She was a specialist in human development and gave motivational talks on resilience and overcoming adversity. We ended up talking for hours after the meeting, and I shared a little bit of my story with her. Olivia listened carefully, and at the end, she said something I will never forget. "Rachel, the pain you went through doesn't have to be a burden. It can become your greatest source of power. Have you ever thought that by sharing your story, you could inspire others who are going through the same thing?" Those words echoed inside me. Until then, I had treated my story as a shameful secret, something I wanted to hide from the world. But in that moment, I realized that maybe I could transform my pain into something greater, something that could actually help others. That's when I began a new practice with the law of attraction. I started to visualize not only my personal life transformed, but also the possibility of impacting other people's lives. I imagined myself in the future, telling my story in an inspiring way, helping others rise from their own struggles. And once again, the universe listened. Not long after, Olivia invited me to give a short testimony at an event organized by the NGO. It was a talk for young people about resilience and life choices. At first, I was terrified. Me? Speak in public about my life? What if I freeze? What if they judge me? But something stronger than fear made me accept. On the day of the event, I stepped onto the stage with cold hands and a racing heart. I took a deep breath, looked at those young faces, and decided to be honest. I spoke about the betrayal, about hitting rock bottom, and about how I was rebuilding myself through gratitude, visualization, and faith in the power of thoughts. To my surprise, people didn't look at me with judgment. On the contrary, I saw teary eyes, nods of understanding, and at the end I received hugs and words of gratitude. It was one of the most powerful moments of my life. In that moment, I realized my pain had turned into purpose. After that event, something inside me fully awakened. I began writing in my journal more and more, not only gratitude lists, but also clear intentions for my future. I wrote affirmations like, "I am ready to live a healthy and true love. My life overflows with joy and peace. I inspire others through my story." And the more I wrote, the more I believed.
The universe's signs multiplied. A book that literally fell from a bookstore shelf into my hands. A song that started playing exactly when I needed to hear those words. Seemingly random encounters with people who brought me messages of encouragement. Everything felt aligned. But despite all this growth, there was still something that challenged me. Learning to trust again. I knew that at some point I would have to open my heart to love again. But how could I do that after being so deeply betrayed and broken? How could I believe it was possible to live a healthy, true relationship? It was at that stage of my journey that the law of attraction once again showed me its strength. Instead of focusing on the fear of betrayal, I decided to concentrate on what I truly wanted to attract. I wrote a detailed list of the qualities I wanted in a partner: respect, affection, loyalty, empathy, humor. More importantly, I wrote how I wanted to feel by this person's side: safe, loved, valued. And instead of desperately searching for someone who fit that list, I began to act as if I already had that love. I treated myself with care, respected myself, valued myself. I started going out alone for coffee, traveling to nearby towns just to enjoy life, buying flowers for myself. I was showing the universe that I was already worthy of that love, even before it appeared. And as you can imagine, the universe didn't take long to respond. But that is a part of my story I'll share in the next chapter.
Rachel woke up on a cold winter morning with the feeling that something inside her had finally shifted for good. The process of rebuilding wasn't linear. There were days of victories and others of setbacks. But that morning, looking out the window as the timid sun pierced through the clouds, she had the clarity that she was truly rewriting her story. Her journal was no longer just a space for painful confessions. Its pages now carried visions, dreams, and declarations of a future she was beginning to believe was possible. She wrote phrases like, "I deserve to be truly loved," or "My life is guided by abundance." At first, it felt artificial, almost like lying to herself. But the more she repeated them, the more those words seeped into her mind and took root in her heart. One day, while out for a walk, Rachel noticed she no longer felt the same heaviness in her chest that used to weigh her down on streets filled with memories of her past. The cafes where she once sat crying now felt neutral, even inviting. It was as if the weight that once crushed her had lost its power. That's when she understood the power of the law of attraction. It wasn't just about wishing for things, but about aligning internally, vibrating in harmony with what she wanted to receive. It was during this period that Rachel decided to challenge herself. She created a daily ritual. Every morning, before even checking her phone, she looked in the mirror and repeated affirmations of self-love. At first, her voice was shaky, but little by little she began to speak with confidence. By the end of the first week, something incredible happened. For the first time in months, she looked at herself and smiled. It wasn't a smile to mask the pain, but a genuine smile, the smile of someone beginning to recognize herself again. And it wasn't only internal changes. External circumstances began reflecting this new energy. Small coincidences, or signs as she preferred to call them, started to appear. An unexpected email inviting her to a free motivational lecture. A chance encounter with an old friend who brought exactly the words of encouragement she needed. Even a promotion at work that once seemed impossible but happened as if it had always been meant for her. Rachel began to understand that life was responding to what she was radiating. The more she cultivated gratitude and positive thoughts, the more the universe seemed to conspire in her favor. This didn't mean the absence of challenges, but it meant that now she faced them differently. Pain was no longer a prison, it was fuel. On a Saturday night, sitting in her living room with candles lit and soft music playing, Rachel did a different visualization. Instead of focusing on the past, she imagined the future in detail. She saw herself walking hand in hand with someone who respected her, living a light, playful relationship full of companionship. But more than that, she saw herself fulfilled on her own, complete within herself, radiating confidence and serenity. In that moment, she realized the true transformation was already happening. She was no longer searching for an external savior because she had discovered the strength within. But the universe still had something greater reserved for her, something that would surprise her soon, placing her before a new opportunity to prove just how far her faith and practice of the law of attraction could take her. Rachel was no longer the same woman who, months earlier, had felt the world collapsing on her shoulders. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but rather like a seed that germinated silently until, suddenly, it began to bloom for all to see. What had once been pain was now strength, and what once seemed like the end now revealed itself as a new beginning. That Monday morning, Rachel woke up early, as she had been doing for the past several months. The ritual had already become an essential part of her life. She looked at herself in the mirror, lit a white candle, and told herself, "I am worthy. I am enough. The universe is on my side." As she repeated those phrases, there was no hesitation anymore. Her voice was steady, her gaze confident. Each word vibrated within her like an absolute truth. Work, which had once been just an automatic routine to pay bills, had now become fertile ground for new possibilities. After her unexpected promotion, Rachel felt her ideas were finally being recognized. More than that, she realized her contagious energy was beginning to inspire colleagues. Many noticed how much she had changed, and some even sought her out for advice. But what Rachel didn't imagine was that this inner transformation was about to attract something far greater than she could have planned. One afternoon, while organizing reports in her office, Rachel received an email that left her speechless. It was an invitation to participate in a national conference on innovation and leadership, something she had always admired but had never seen herself as part of. The most surprising part was that her name had been recommended by someone outside her company, someone who had followed her posts on professional networks and had been inspired by her reflections on resilience and overcoming challenges. In the past, Rachel would have declined immediately, thinking, "That's not for me, I'm not good enough." But now, a new voice inside her said, "If the universe brought this to you, it's because you are ready." With her heart racing, she accepted. The conference would take place in another city, and Rachel decided to make the trip a milestone in her new life. She packed carefully, choosing clothes that made her feel confident, and slipped her journal, her inseparable companion, into her bag. On the flight, as she gazed at the clouds through the window, she wrote, "I am living a new version of my story. Everything conspires in my favor. I am open to the opportunities that come my way." When she arrived at the hotel, Rachel took a deep breath, savoring the excitement of something new. The atmosphere of that place, with people from all over the country gathered to share ideas, was electronicizing. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a spectator of life, but rather the protagonist of her own narrative. During the first evening of the conference, there was a welcome cocktail. Rachel, who used to avoid social interactions out of insecurity, decided she wouldn't let fear control her steps anymore. She served herself a glass of wine, found a spot near the stage, and simply allowed herself to observe. That was when someone approached her. A tall man with elegant gray hair and a warm smile struck up a conversation naturally. His name was Daniel Harper, a business consultant and renowned speaker. Their conversation flowed effortlessly. Rachel was surprised at how clearly she could express herself without the burden of seeking approval. Daniel listened with genuine interest, praising her ideas and commenting on the importance of people like her bringing fresh perspectives to the corporate world. It was just a conversation at an event, but Rachel felt something different. A sincere connection, effortless, without masks. Later, alone in her hotel room, she smiled at her journal and wrote in her journal, "Today I met someone who reminded me how good it feels to be myself." Maybe that's the true secret of the law of attraction. When you radiate authenticity, you attract connections that resonate with your essence. On the second day of the conference, Rachel would face one of the greatest challenges of her life, stepping onto the stage and sharing her vision in front of hundreds of people.
That morning, nervousness tried to take over, but she closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and repeated, "I am capable. I have a message that deserves to be heard." When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage with steady steps. Holding the microphone, she spoke not only about professional strategies, but also about her personal journey. She talked about pain, about resilience, and about how she had learned that true leadership begins within, when we choose not to be victims of circumstances, but creators of our reality. The auditorium, which at first seemed intimidating, gradually became a space of connection. Rachel felt each word flow straight from her heart, and people responded with attention and emotion. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. She stepped down from the stage with tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. She felt she had found her voice, and this was one of the greatest manifestations she could have ever attracted. After the talk, many people approached to congratulate her. Some wanted to hear more, others asked for advice. Even the event organizers mentioned the possibility of inviting her again for future conferences. Rachel was ecstatic. Amid all that excitement, Daniel reappeared, this time with an even warmer smile. "You were amazing," he said. "Your words touched people in a way I rarely see." Rachel thanked him, and once again their conversation flowed as if they had known each other for years. There was no rush, no hidden agendas, just a genuine connection. Later, alone in her hotel room, she smiled at her journal and wrote in her journal, "Today I met someone who reminded me how good it feels to be myself." Maybe that's the true secret of the law of attraction. When you radiate authenticity, you attract connections that resonate with your essence. On the second day of the conference, Rachel would face one of the greatest challenges of her life, stepping onto the stage and sharing her vision in front of hundreds of people. That morning, nervousness tried to take over, but she closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and repeated, "I am capable. I have a message that deserves to be heard." When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage with steady steps. Holding the microphone, she spoke not only about professional strategies, but also about her personal journey. She talked about pain, about resilience, and about how she had learned that true leadership begins within, when we choose not to be victims of circumstances, but creators of our reality. The auditorium, which at first seemed intimidating, gradually became a space of connection. Rachel felt each word flow straight from her heart, and people responded with attention and emotion. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. She stepped down from the stage with tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. She felt she had found her voice, and this was one of the greatest manifestations she could have ever attracted. After the talk, many people approached to congratulate her. Some wanted to hear more, others asked for advice. Even the event organizers mentioned the possibility of inviting her again for future conferences. Rachel was ecstatic. Amid all that excitement, Daniel reappeared, this time with an even warmer smile. "You were amazing," he said. "Your words touched people in a way I rarely see." Rachel thanked him, and once again their conversation flowed as if they had known each other for years. There was no rush, no hidden agendas, just a genuine connection. Later, alone in her hotel room, she smiled at her journal and wrote in her journal, "Today I met someone who reminded me how good it feels to be myself." Maybe that's the true secret of the law of attraction. When you radiate authenticity, you attract connections that resonate with your essence. On the second day of the conference, Rachel would face one of the greatest challenges of her life, stepping onto the stage and sharing her vision in front of hundreds of people. That morning, nervousness tried to take over, but she closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and repeated, "I am capable. I have a message that deserves to be heard." When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage with steady steps. Holding the microphone, she spoke not only about professional strategies, but also about her personal journey. She talked about pain, about resilience, and about how she had learned that true leadership begins within, when we choose not to be victims of circumstances, but creators of our reality. The auditorium, which at first seemed intimidating, gradually became a space of connection. Rachel felt each word flow straight from her heart, and people responded with attention and emotion. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. She stepped down from the stage with tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. She felt she had found her voice, and this was one of the greatest manifestations she could have ever attracted. After the talk, many people approached to congratulate her. Some wanted to hear more, others asked for advice. Even the event organizers mentioned the possibility of inviting her again for future conferences. Rachel was ecstatic. Amid all that excitement, Daniel reappeared, this time with an even warmer smile. "You were amazing," he said. "Your words touched people in a way I rarely see." Rachel thanked him, and once again their conversation flowed as if they had known each other for years. There was no rush, no hidden agendas, just a genuine connection. When the conference came to an end, Rachel flew back home with her heart full of hope and confidence. The trip had not only given her professional recognition, but had also shown her she was ready to open new doors in her personal life. Back in her routine, she noticed everything felt differently. Her apartment was no longer just a space of solitude, but a place where she could feel peace. The city streets no longer carried painful memories, but new possibilities. Even the silence, which used to frighten her, now felt comforting. Rachel knew there was still much to build, but
Rachel woke up that morning with a different feeling, a mix of expectation and serenity. It wasn't anxiety, nor the tension that had accompanied her for years. It was the certainty that something big was about to happen, and for the first time in a long while, she truly felt ready to receive it. The past few months had been intense. The national conference, the unexpected encounters, the connection with Daniel, and the consolidation of her daily practice with the law of attraction had changed not only her perception of the world, but also of herself. She no longer saw herself as a victim of external circumstances. Now she knew that her vibration, her beliefs, and her aligned actions were the key to creating the life she had always desired. That day, when she opened her email in the morning, Rachel found something that took her breath away. It was a partnership proposal to launch a personal project that combined education, motivation, and social impact, exactly the kind of work she had always dreamed of doing. But there was more. The proposal came from an international company with wide reach, which meant her message could inspire thousands of people. She sat still for a few seconds, absorbing the meaning of that moment. The universe had delivered, in a surprising way, everything she had been silently manifesting. Every affirmation, every visualization, every gesture of self-love and gratitude had paved the way for this gift. Rachel took a deep breath and wrote in her journal, "I knew everything I dreamed of was on its way. I just needed to become the person capable of receiving it." In the following days, Rachel immersed herself in planning the project. Every detail was carefully thought out, from the message she wanted to share to the way she would engage the audience. She remembered each piece of advice she had received along her journey and incorporated it into her work. The feeling of creating something with purpose was indescribable. Daniel remained present, but in a subtle and respectful way. He had become not just a trustworthy friend, but also a confidant, someone who encouraged her to expand her vision without ever pressuring her. Their relationship was unlike anything Rachel had ever experienced, based on respect, trust, and positive energy, with no shadows from the past. Meanwhile, Rachel continued her daily practices. Every morning she visualized the success of the project and how it would impact people's lives. Each night ended with gratitude for the small victories of the day, reinforcing the sense that her life was aligned with her deepest desires. But as with every great transformation, a test soon came. Some partners at the company expressed doubts about the project's potential. Messages of skepticism and questions about her ability began to appear. For a moment, Rachel felt the old fear trying to return. What if I'm not capable? What if everything falls apart? At that moment, she remembered everything she had already achieved. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and repeated her affirmations with conviction. "I am capable. I am worthy. The universe is on my side."
And instead of being shaken, she decided to transform the doubt into positive energy. Each criticism became fuel to work even harder and show that her vision was valid and powerful. That inner alignment was crucial because in the law of attraction, what you deeply feel manifests in the external world. In the weeks that followed, a series of coincidences and unexpected events confirmed that Rachel was on the right path. Books that addressed exactly the themes she wanted to develop crossed her path. Messages of encouragement arrived from people she didn't even know, and opportunities to promote the project appeared almost magically. Rachel understood it wasn't just luck. It was the concrete manifestation of her faith, her consistent practice, and the energy she had been radiating. Every step she took, every positive thought, every aligned action further amplified the frequency of what she was attracting. The big day of the project launch finally arrived. Rachel was anxious, but anxiety no longer carried the same weight as before. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and once again visualized success. Engaged participants, positive impact, emotional feedback. When she opened the event, she saw exactly what she had imagined. The audience responded with enthusiasm, messages of gratitude, and stories of how the initiative was already inspiring change. Rachel felt a wave of emotion that nearly brought her to tears. She realized she was finally living the reality she had manifested, and that every moment of pain and every practice of visualization had been worth it. After the event, Daniel approached with a smile that radiated pride and genuine joy. They talked about the project's success, about future possibilities, but also about something more personal. For the first time, Rachel allowed herself to open her heart without fear. She realized that by becoming whole and authentic, she had attracted not only professional opportunities, but deep, genuine human connections. Daniel wasn't a replacement for a painful past, but a manifestation of what could arise when someone aligns with their own energy and authenticity. In the following weeks, Rachel began to notice even more subtle yet powerful changes in her daily life. People who once seemed indifferent now treated her with respect and attention. Projects that had seemed impossible materialized with ease. Her mental and emotional health stabilized in an extraordinary way. She no longer carried the weight of the past, only gratitude for the lessons it had brought. She understood that the law of attraction wasn't just about getting what you want, but about becoming the person capable of deserving and sustaining those achievements. The power had been inside her all along. She just needed to align thoughts, emotions, and actions. Rachel sat by the window watching the sunset. She breathed deeply, feeling every cell in her body vibrate in tune with her new state of being. The pain of betrayal had transformed into strength. The fear of starting over had turned into courage. Insecurity had become confidence. She smiled and wrote in her journal, "The universe didn't just answer me. It gave me the chance to create something greater than I ever imagined. Today, I know life is a reflection of the energy we put into the world, and I choose to vibrate high, always." Rachel Donovan had finally rebuilt herself. But the story was not over.
Rachel Donovan was no longer the woman who, months ago, had felt broken and betrayed. Every challenge faced, every tear shed, and every daily practice with the law of attraction had built a stronger, more confident, and more radiant version of herself. But life had one more gift reserved, something that would deeply touch not only her career, but also her heart. After the project's success, Rachel and Daniel continued to see each other often. What began as a friendship and professional partnership slowly transformed into something deeper. They shared experiences, dreams, books, and moments that gradually became intimate. Rachel realized she felt neither fear nor urgency. There was only a sense of naturalness, as if the universe had created this connection for them both. One quiet evening, while walking through a park lit by soft lights, Daniel held her hand and said, "Rachel, it's incredible how you've turned your pain into strength. The energy you radiate is rare. I feel inspired just by being around you."
Rachel felt a wave of emotion. It wasn't just the romance of the moment, but the deep recognition that she had attracted someone who wasn't trying to control her or fill a void, but who shared her energy and resonance. It was the reflection of what she herself had cultivated: authenticity, self-love, and clarity about who she truly was. Before, Rachel had felt limited by hurt, betrayal, and the fear of opening up again. Now those barriers had dissolved. She understood that true strength wasn't about avoiding pain, but about embracing it, learning from each experience, and transforming it into wisdom. She also realized that happiness didn't depend on another person. Genuine joy came from within, from alignment with her own desires, gratitude, and the daily practice of becoming who she wanted to be. Daniel, in this context, was a complement, not a necessity. That clarity completely changed the dynamic of their relationship. Now both connected on deeper levels based on respect, admiration, and genuine love. Rachel began to notice that her personal transformation was impacting others. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers approached her seeking advice, inspiration, or simply to hear her story. She received messages from women and men who felt motivated to face challenges, forgive past traumas, and pursue lives aligned with their deepest desires. She started writing articles on resilience, meditation, and the law of attraction, sharing her experiences and insights. Each text became a powerful testimony, showing that even those who had endured intense pain could rebuild and thrive. One of the practices Rachel valued most was visualization. Every morning, she sat in silence, closed her eyes, and imagined her ideal life in detail. The career she wanted, healthy relationships, vibrant health, and a constant sense of joy. She visualized each scene with emotion and clarity, as if she were already living those experiences in the present. The most incredible part was seeing how those visualizations began to manifest in real life. Small coincidences became big opportunities. An unexpected invitation to give a lecture, a project that once seemed distant coming true. Moments of deep connection with Daniel that mirrored exactly what she had imagined. Everything confirmed that constant practice, combined with faith, brought tangible results. To celebrate her growth and mark the start of a new cycle, Rachel decided to take a solo trip to a spiritual retreat in another country. The experience was transformative. Away from daily distractions, she immersed herself in deep meditation practices, walks in nature, and moments of reflection. One morning, during a walk at sunrise, Rachel felt an intense connection with the universe. Watching the sun rise on the horizon, she realized that every challenge, every tear, and every victory had been necessary for her to arrive there. She was living proof that pain was not the end, but the path to true fulfillment. During the trip, Rachel filled pages of her journal with reflections on her journey. She realized she had gained something far greater than professional success or recognition. She had regained her self-confidence, learned to love herself deeply, and to vibrate in alignment with her essence. She also acknowledged that forgiveness had been one of her most powerful tools. Forgiving Daniel and herself didn't mean forgetting or condoning what had happened, but releasing the heavy energy that kept her tied to the past. By doing so, Rachel made space for new experiences, healthy relationships, and a full life. Upon returning from the trip, Rachel and Daniel began living an even more conscious relationship. There was no rush or unrealistic expectation. There was respect, admiration, and a deep alignment of values. Rachel realized that by rebuilding herself and aligning with her own energy, she had attracted not only opportunities and recognition, but also a genuine, balanced relationship. They shared simple yet meaningful moments, deep conversations, sincere laughter, mutual support in challenges, and celebration of victories. Rachel finally understood that true love doesn't fix the pain of the past. It emerges when we are whole, authentic, and vibrating at the same frequency. At 43, Rachel Donovan had experienced a complete reconstruction. She had gone from the pain of betrayal to inner strength, from fear to confidence, from loneliness to deep connection. Every step she took was guided by the practice of the law of attraction, by faith in herself, and by the determination to become the woman she had always wanted to be. That night, as she closed her journal, Rachel wrote, "I rebuilt myself. I found myself. I discovered that the universe always conspires in favor of those who align with their own essence, and this is only the beginning of a life full of infinite possibilities."
Rachel Donovan woke up that morning with the feeling that she was truly living the fullness of her own life. Every breath, every ray of sunlight that came through the window, every little detail seemed to reflect the profound transformation she had achieved. It was not just about professional success or recognition. It was about reconnecting with her essence, aligning with her deepest desires, and manifesting the life she truly wished to live. In the past few months, her life had become a direct reflection of her practices with the law of attraction. The project she had launched had reached thousands of people, inspiring real changes in their lives. Rachel received heartfelt messages from people saying they had found the courage to overcome challenges, pursue their dreams, and believe in themselves. Each story shared with her reinforced the power of her own choices, the strength of aligned thinking, and the importance of vibrating in harmony with what one desires. On a personal level, Rachel felt whole. Her relationship with Daniel had developed naturally, without haste, without excessive expectations. What existed between them was respect, trust, and deep mutual admiration. But more than that, Rachel knew that happiness did not depend on someone else. She had discovered that true joy comes from within, from the ability to love herself, accept herself, and allow herself to live fully. Every encounter with Daniel was a reminder that when we vibrate authenticity and self-love, we attract people who resonate with our own energy. They shared dreams, achievements, and even small daily victories, building a solid and inspiring partnership. Rachel finally understood that healthy relationships do not exist to fill voids, but to multiply the joy and growth already present within us. Professionally, Rachel had become a reference in her field. Her lectures and workshops impacted thousands of people, and her writing was recognized for conveying hope and real transformation. Financial success, which once seemed distant, now came naturally, aligned with her dedication and the energy she put into each project. What made it all even more meaningful was the fact that Rachel was not seeking recognition only for herself. Above all, she wanted to inspire others to believe in their own power. Every story of overcoming, every piece of feedback she received was living proof that the law of attraction works when applied with faith, consistency, and authenticity. Rachel maintained her daily gratitude practice. Every morning, before doing anything else, she would mentally list or write in her journal everything she was grateful for. This simple yet powerful practice reinforced the positive energy in her life and amplified her manifestations even more. She realized that gratitude not only attracted more reasons to be thankful, but also transformed her perception of life, making it lighter, fuller, and more abundant. One of the greatest lessons Rachel learned was that her life was a direct reflection of the energy she put into the world. Every thought, every emotion, every action aligned with her values and desires manifested into real experiences. The painful past, which once seemed like an endless shadow, was now only a lesson, a reminder of how far she had come. She understood that true transformation is not only about changing external circumstances, but about altering the way we see ourselves and the world. When we vibrate authenticity, self-love, and faith, the universe responds accordingly, bringing opportunities, people, and experiences that reflect that energy. Rachel sat on her porch at sunset, with a cup of hot tea in hand, watching the sky painted in golden and orange hues. She smiled, feeling peace, confidence, and wholeness.
The path that had brought her there had not been easy, but every challenge, every tear, and every painful moment had been necessary to build the woman she had become. What once seemed impossible, overcoming betrayal, rebuilding her self-esteem, manifesting opportunities, attracting healthy relationships, was now her reality. Rachel had learned that the power to transform life lies within each other, and the law of attraction is not only about wishing, but about becoming the person capable of receiving what one desires. As the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, Rachel reflected on her journey. She realized that every step, every practice, every aligned decision had built a new story, a story of strength, courage, self-love, and fulfillment. She knew the process never truly ends. Life is continuous, full of challenges and opportunities. But now, Rachel was prepared to face anything with confidence, faith, and clarity, knowing that the universe always conspires in favor of those who align with their true essence. And now, I want to know from you, watching this, which part of Rachel Donovan's story touched your heart the most? Leave your comment and share a single word that represents what you felt while following this incredible transformation. That way, I'll know who truly watched until the end and connected with this inspiring story. Remember, just like Rachel, you too can rebuild your life, transform challenges into strength, and manifest everything your heart desires through the consistent practice of the law of attraction.